The views and opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Forge Fitness and Nutrition LLC, the podcast hosts, owners, employees, contractors, partners, or affiliates. This presentation may include the use of explicit language. Listener or viewer discretion is advised. Thank you so much for joining us in part 2 and the conclusion of episode 1 of the Forge Fitness and Nutrition Habit podcast. Because this episode was a bit of a longer episode and we cut it into 2 parts, here are a few notes to remind you of where we left off in part 1, which will conclude right after this briefing. In part 1, we discussed the misconceptions that were surrounding success in fitness, the toxicity of certain fitness trends, and the importance of long-term approaches to health. The conversation delved into the impact of social media on body image, what I believe is the oversimplification of wellness, and the significance of your mindset in achieving fitness goals. We also debunked common myths, and the conversation really emphasized the need for a balanced approach to fitness, nutrition, and habit change, along with the dangers of social media echo chambers that can reinforce your very negative behaviors. Now, we left off with Sarah sharing her frustration with a friend who refused, like so many others, to take responsibility for their own health. Let's take a quick listen to the last few moments of that part, and then we're going to transition directly into the conclusion of episode 1. Like I said earlier, misery loves company, and people actually want you to validate their bad behavior.
Correct.
So where do they go to get reinforcement? Social media echo chambers. They go to a place where other people positively reinforce deconstructive and potentially deadly behaviors of others for the sake of not hurting anyone's feelings, or to be socially acceptable, or to seem benevolent, and like that whole you go girl, or like, whatever, you do you.
It's so powerful. You're right, because it is potentially deadly. You as someone who's like a conscious person, not wanting to upset anybody, are you actually enabling someone closer towards an early death?
Well, I will tell you that the top body positivity, obese, TikTok influencers are all dead.
Jeez, we should fact check that and post that, because that is terrifying.
It is a significant and terrifying reality that we look for people to reinforce negative behavior because we live in a society that no one wants their feelings hurt.
So you were saying how these influencers and the body positivity movement is actually, dangerous.
Can be.
I think it's important not to shame people. I do think that's an important distinction, because it's not about shaming people that have gotten into this situation of obesity. That doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help them. It doesn't help you as a human being. But encouraging health is different, right? It's not the same thing.
I'll just give you a brief overview of the differentiation between guilt and shame. While guilt focuses on very specific behaviors or actions that conflict with your personal values, shame attacks your self-identity, making you feel fundamentally flawed. And in fitness, individuals can sometimes feel guilty. Like, for example, missing a workout. That's an easy one. I feel guilty for missing my workout. Whereas shame might make them feel that they are incapable of being fit, or that they're a piece of shit because they're not.
Yes.
So recognizing the nuance, the difference, can help you address the root cause of the emotion, and you can develop effective mechanisms that you're not using to cope, but you're using to find solutions. It's important that we consider that shame is not necessarily bad. And I'll tell you why. Because shame means that you are doing something systemic to your behavior. You are constantly misbehaving. No one can make you feel shame. What happens is that now when people are given evidence of their behavior, they say they're being shamed. It's another abdication. It's basically people once again saying, even if it's true, you can't say it. It is literally the suppression of free communication and the ability to have dialogue with other people. You shut them down being honest and truthful, that there's a way to say something to somebody. And if they feel shame, but your place came from love and for the desire to improve their life, like with your friend that you were just saying, maybe he felt a modest degree of shame, but the shame isn't your problem. And I don't understand this new thing that society has just made up, that now I'm personally responsible for your fucking feelings all the time. It's
But
not my problem.
it's not, but you're not the person that's going on and offering unsolicited advice or opinions in people's comment section and calling them names and tearing them down. I think that's more where like that comes from, right? Because for instance, my friend, he will come to me and talk to me and ask, and then he would stop because he didn't like the response that he was getting. But, there's a difference between being honest and truthful and having a productive dialogue versus just attacking somebody because it's an aesthetic that you find displeasing.
That was what I was just saying. The way in which it's said is what matters. I can't choose how somebody's going to feel. I could say something in the right tone, in the right context, and if they feel shame, that's not my problem.
That's what I wanted to clarify. That's what you mean. You're not going out there and just getting on Lizzo's Facebook and be like,
No,
fat
never.
fuck.
You would never see me do
Exactly.
that. So, okay,
Yes.
so I think that there's a very important distinction here that we have to see, that the social issue here is actually a lack of courtesy. It is an inability to communicate clearly and effectively with other people in a way that is compassionate, even some kind of empathy. I don't think sympathy is always the right course, by the
No,
way. I
but
think
empathy,
has
yes.
more power. I want to make sure that we understand this. We're talking about different things. You're talking about bullying.
Yes. Okay.
They're
Yeah.
very different. And the problem is that that social media has changed the limit. Okay, I'll give you an example. You can't get punched in the face through a monitor.
No.
It changes everything. So I want to make sure that we're very precise on what we're saying here, that I don't believe that it's appropriate to ever bully anybody on social media about anything. Like I get bullied all the time. People make fun of my hair. Guess what? I don't feel guilt or shame about it. When I read something like that, I say, I don't care what you think.
Yeah. There's something that I find interesting about the shame, and when you say shame isn't necessarily a bad thing, is that not dependent upon the mindset of the person experiencing the shame? Because if you can,
Yeah, but that's not my problem.
it's not. But in terms of you being like your clients, wanting to assist them in the achievement of their goals, I'm thinking like from myself back in the day in my shame spirals, I was not able to see like how we talked about stuffing chocolate in the couch versus the cupboard because I felt shame for buying it, right?
Well, was that shame or guilt?
I think it was both, probably, but definitely shame. I think shame is more debilitating than guilt because I feel guilt now when I miss my gym sessions. Oh, fuck. But I don't feel as though I have failed fundamentally as a human being and that my worth as a person is less because I'm not subscribing to a certain aesthetic.
And that was the nuanced distinction that I had made early, the differentiation between guilt and shame.
Exactly. But I don't think that shame in that moment was helpful to me at all because it felt debilitating and it made me go more into myself and more secretive in my behavior versus helping push me into a productive action and or mindset.
But you recognize that, which is why half of your bookcase is self-help books. You took responsibility. So you recognized the behavioral pattern that you knew was destructive, and then you sought solutions and you have worked very diligently to improve that. So now you have removed yourself from shame and now you have only instances of guilt. This is a problem you solved on your own. Personal responsibility. This is going to be a theme.
Yes.
You could go up and you could do a TED Talk. You know why? Because you pulled yourself from the depths of despair. Nobody's going to go to a fucking TED Talk to hear how much you suck. Nobody's going to go and listen to how you're so miserable. That's what TikTok is for.
Yes. People
will want to go and they want to listen to the inspiration, how you were mired in all of this shame and bad choices, and you had a dysmorphia and you had the wrong impression of what your physique should look like or how you should be performing, how it translated into your acting. I will concede this, is that I'm not in Lizzo's comments, right? I typically wouldn't necessarily bring her up, but I bring her up because there is a popular debate on social media whether or not that it's appropriate for her to pretend that she's healthy when we all know that she's not. But it's
Lizzo, I think she's amazing. I listen to all her music and I love her as a human being.
That's not the point.
Then a lot. Yeah, sorry. Can you say your point? Go, and then I'm going to say mine.
I want to codify my point.
Yes.
Which is that you made a realization, 30 times 3 plus 10 rule. You realized that a lot of this was your mindset. And so you slid your scale fitness and nutrition was never your problem when we first met. It was all here.
Yeah.
And between your own research and some of the other avenues that you were taking, you had the personal wherewithal. You had said this earlier, that some people don't have this self-awareness. Well, you started to garner the self-awareness. And so what ended up happening inevitably is you start collecting books about how to improve yourself. And you hire professionals to help lift you up and to become a foundation for you to launch yourself off of. Now, for me to shame you would almost be impossible because it would cross over into bullying. The one thing that I can do is I can point out areas of opportunity for you to improve. And that's not shaming.
As your self-esteem improves, like you were saying, if people come at you, you're just like, I don't give a fuck. You can't really get shamed so much.
Look, I'm a sensitive guy. I really am. I do have a tendency to take certain things personally. And I can tell you precisely what it is that I take personally is when somebody doesn't have any knowledge, they don't know me, and they make assumptions based on a 30-second story on Instagram. And that's why Heather always says, you can't take that personally. But what I was saying, and not to be contentious, our conversations, we're always going to have instances where there's going to be certain buzzwords that are used. I've never felt that I have to be overly conscientious about shaming somebody by being honest with them, because it's the way that I say it, and I never bully.
Yeah, it's the intention for sure.
Well, I mean, intent matters.
It does. Even in murder, intent matters.
But in this particular case, you can have all the best intentions of the world and still make a terrible mistake.
Yes.
So there has to be a little bit of goddamn common sense.
Manslaughter. Even in murder, even in killing someone, intent is everything, man. It's everything.
When it comes down to shaming, there's usually an intent to shame. And what I find interesting is that we're blurring all the lines between the terms. It's just fucking bullying.
No, it is. And it's interesting, like when we talk about like celebrities who are, I guess, poster people for obese community, when someone does make the decision to lose weight, like Adele, who recently lost a lot of weight for health reasons, the criticism that she faced online is insane. Sell out, whatever they accuse her of, because what? Because of what? She was a role model to somebody who now has to look at their own life and their own health, and I don't know. And instead of dealing with that, they lash out and they attack her. That's her life, her choice. If she, chose to lose weight for health reasons, good on her. If she chose not to, that's also fine. That's her choice. True.
So Adele would be the only person to say that she was shamed. But here's what's interesting. I think that there is a misrepresentation of what these words mean. It's like toned. They're used in the wrong context. And what that's doing is it's causing a very imprecise way of communicating. Then you can't have constructive dialogue, because we live in a society where, like, oh, my feelings are hurt.
Have you not just nailed the problem right now that we're going on with everyone getting tripped up over their own toes about specific wording? It needs to be intent. Like, it really does. Like, it's emotions, it's intent. We can't, if we just fall over ourselves to be finicky with word choice. Oh my goodness.
I wanted to clarify one more thing. I was talking about intent is only part of it. The rest is your delivery.
Mm-hmm.
Using your example, in the intent to murder somebody is why we have degrees of murder to manslaughter. Yep. Sometimes you fuck up and there's an accident and someone gets hurt. It could be simple as just like you didn't see the stop sign and you ran through and somebody was devastatedly hurt. But there was no intention to do that. Right. You want to make sure that we're very clear on that, because what everybody likes to pretend that everyone's a mass shooter with their words.
Yeah.
And that's not true.
It's not true. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What it is that people are weak and they're always looking for ways to abdicate their fucking responsibility and turn it into somebody else's problem. And that is unacceptable. If I misspeak and I use the wrong delivery with a client, this happens to me. There has been times where I misread the room. Mm. The intention was wholesome. The delivery missed.
Yeah.
That's not shame. People need to step back and start to realize that they're adults, and that you can't pretend that you're in kindergarten all the time. And he's looking at me. He's looking at me. That's what people sound like to me.
And I'm laughing, but only because it is so, like, I love it. It's refreshing to me to have dialogue without fear. There is just so much fear at the moment permeating conversation.
Sarah, it is so difficult to figure out fear as it relates to a broader spectrum of community that
Yes.
is false. Now, when we had smaller communities, not tribal, right? So I'm not going that far back. I'm just let's go to like a couple hundred years ago. The community was all that mattered.
Mm-hmm.
So dialogue had to be clear. You had to be honest with your neighbors. In fact, that's what being a good neighbor was.
Yes.
Nowadays, we don't have that. As a matter of fact, more people know people on social media than they know the people who live next to them.
I know. Isn't that terrifying? It's true. It's 100% true.
So what are the implications of that? So, and you mentioned it. So fear. Okay. Well, interestingly enough, I have a degree of fear even doing this podcast.
Yeah, of course. It's healthier. I mean, I guess I do as well. Sometimes when you think about just dialoguing naturally as it flows with a friend, that we have trust between each other, but we don't know who is listening, who's going to listen, who's going to be shared to. All of the, it's really an exercise in faith and trust in our intention, because our intentions are good and caring.
This podcast just popped up very quickly. One of the things that we said almost mutually at the same time was that in order for this to work and have any value or merit, was that we simply had to be as authentic as we could be.
That's right.
We're going to be ourselves.
There is so much inauthenticity at the moment. That's, like I said, that's a rampant through so many outlets in the media today, that we are so passionate about cutting through that. And the only way to do that is to bear it all. Look, sometimes I'm going to say shit that didn't come out right. And maybe I wasn't able to express myself as clearly as I wanted. Or maybe I'll say an opinion that next week I won't even think anymore.
That happens. Because with new information,
That's right, because we're growing, evolving beings. And it's okay to be that. And I want to let other people know it's okay to be that. It's okay to not be perfect. It really, really is. I don't know how relevant this story is, but it just happened yesterday. I was talking with a colleague, and he was expressing a frustration that I think a lot of people in social media land would criticize him for. He was saying when he came to this country many years ago as a child, he faced a lot of racism because he's Greek, and there's a term here in Australia called wog, and you get called a wog. And now it's something playful that people say, but back in the day, it was very derogatory and a racial term. And so he had to struggle through all of that, work himself up, get into the industry and make a mark for himself. He said now people are telling him that he is a privileged white man. It's like, wait, when did that happen? When did I become a privileged white guy? Because I thought I was a wog and I needed to go back to my own country. The perception of him, like he's in a blender of like, I am different, I'm an outsider, I'm a wog. And now the trend has moved to that he is a man and he is white, therefore he is privileged. And it's just not his perception of his life. It's very interesting to me.
I hate to beat the shit out of it, but again, a social media fallacy.
It's like you just can't paint everyone with the same brush. You can't just look at a person and determine that who they are and where they've come from, and therefore what they should think and what they should say.
Without getting too far off track, it is valuable to have dialogue that is sometimes antagonistic with the intention of clarification.
Yes.
And people, you put away the obstinance and get out of echo chambers, then the illumination of discovery changes perspective, and you see things in a way that you may not have before. And doesn't that help you grow? Because we grow in light. And the more light you shine on a topic, well, the more nutrition you're getting about it, and you're in a better position to make an assessment. But what happens is that we all live in the dark. We live right here. And this, by the way, I might as well just pick this up. This is how we live.
Yeah.
We live with a phone in our face. And I would submit that it is going to do us more damage. But in the interest of time, in your head, having gone through this whole process, we've talked about the myths, we've discussed some of the problems in social media, we've discussed shame, guilt, and the challenges that people face, and how do they overcome those. And I think the defining theme here is that not everything that we hear and see on social media is true, and that includes the internet in general.
Yeah, so how do we filter that information? It's just too much. It's overwhelming.
Well, okay. So let me answer that more specifically as it relates to fitness and nutrition. And I
Yeah.
think that would probably be a good place. So how do we separate the science-based fitness advice from the hype that we see on social media and all the trends and the
Yeah, because if you're someone that is actually in a place in your life where you're serious, you're like, right, I'm done with the bullshit. I'm done with the games. I want to just know what I have to do in order to achieve my goals. How do I cut through it?
Okay, so I said earlier that I had a 5-step process for doing this. I'll share that
Okay.
with you.
Yep. I want to know.
Well, you got to ask yourself a few questions before you fall for the waist trainers.
Oh my God,
uh,
yes.
yeah, detox teas, all that shit.
Oh my God.
TikTok influencers doing squats on a Bosa ball with a blindfold while eating kumquats. All
Yes.
of that kind of stuff. That
In the
all of that stuff.
Himalayas at altitude. Yes. Okay, so assuming I'm just a regular Joe, but I have decided that I really like I'm serious. I don't want
Yeah,
a quick fix. I want to do this. I want to know what is real. How do I find that?
I'm going to remove the blanket statement of empirical or evidence-based research and the conclusions thereof are the only way to be sure. Okay, we know that. In the absence of you burying yourself in a textbook and peer
Mm,
review articles, here's just 5 simple things that you can do. Number 1 is you look for the basic principles and not gimmicks. So what does that mean? Well, science-based fitness sticks to fundamentals: progressive overload, proper nutrition, sleep, recovery, consistency. And then there's acute variables within that: the construction of the exercise protocol, the undulation of calories based on need. All of those things can be done very, very simply, straightforward, and scientifically. The hype chase shortcuts always sound too good to be true, like drop 10 pounds in 3 days or do this one weird trick. That's another thing I'm seeing all the time. Oh,
God.
here's this hack. You know, the bottom line is if it sounds too good to be true and it's easy and you have to pay for it, it's fake. The only thing you should consider,
Sorry, just breaking hearts right there.
the only thing that you should consider purchasing that's material is equipment to help you get to your goal or a certified professional that can teach you how to use it based on your unique condition and your goal. That's it. That's all you need to do. The diet part is actually really easy. Okay. So that's the first thing. Well, that actually is a nice segue to the second thing who is saying it? Like, where are you hearing this?
Mm.
And then not only do you say who is saying it, but what are they selling?
Yeah. You're right. Who is selling it? It's true. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so is it a registered dietitian and a certified coach, or is it a 20-year-old influencer with a discount code for her booty bands?
But a lot of them claim to be like dietitian based, scientifically, they all say that.
Yeah, I know they say that, but it's easy to ask for credentials. Okay, for example, if you go to the Forge website and you go
Hmm.
to meet the coaches, you will see that all of our credentials are listed. That's what sucks. Somebody actually has to take 5 seconds to validate it, and no
Yeah.
one wants to do that. But let's pretend for a moment that, like you said, somebody really wants
Yep.
to do this, right? So we're going to go on the basis of that.
Yeah.
It's not the 22-year-old selling the booty bands because she didn't get that ass that way. That's not how it works. Or the guy who's like jacked as fuck, but he's 19 years old. Seriously? There's a supplement for that, and it's not legal. Science isn't sexy. I don't know. I like science, but it works. Hype always comes with a sales pitch, and
Yeah.
it's always mutually tied to the first thing that I just said, which is that you look for the principles, the basic scientific rationalization, and not any hyper gimmicks. The third one is it's not anecdotal.
Yep.
It's not weird. So science backed.
See, I want to say that again. It's not anecdotal. That is what is a huge factor for drawing people in. They hear somebody's story, they see before and after photos, which I know you're particularly passionate against, and they're drawn into this story. I'm drawn into these stories when I see them and go, oh, it worked for them. It must work for me.
That kind of really hits this principle: science backed advice with reference studies or mechanisms, or at least decades of experience behind it, like an actual true professional, not a 22-year-old girl who looks good because she's fucking 22,
Mm-hmm.
right? Decades of results. That is reasonable. Hype leans to it worked for me. with zero understanding of context, genetic predisposition, or ability or sustainability whatsoever. Okay, I'll say that one more time. Science-backed advice that can reference, there's a mechanism in place, and then there is at least a reasonable amount of experience behind it. Then, counter to that, which is hype, which it worked for me, or I did this one thing and I saw great results. I did this diet, I saw great results. But there's no understanding of any context, your genetics, or whether or not it's even sustainable. I'll give you an example.
Yes.
Take the biggest hype diet and go and try and do that for the rest of your life. You'll fail.
I've done that.
Yeah,
many times.
I've seen you go through some ringers.
But as an example, I was really into keto before my wedding. I did lose weight. I did, well, about fat, whatever I did, but it was, as you say, incredibly unsustainable. I couldn't live a life.
You're living to eat, not eating to live.
Yeah. It worked. It worked for my goal, but it was difficult and unsustainable. It was, and it creates stress because you have such a small framework to operate in, and then guilt going out of it, like deprivation, all of those things. And the same friend who I was talking about, who's doing the weights training, the rower, I mentioned this too. At my wedding, I was at my goal weight, right? And then when I picked back up with you, training again, I was 10 pounds heavier and thinner. Like measurements. My measurements were smaller. But I had 10 extra pounds on me. Like, you just cannot get, I can't get obsessed with the weight, and sustainability is key. And I was eating more. I was eating more calories. I was eating carbs. Like, it's crazy. Yeah. Living a much more balanced life, having a cheeky margarita on the weekends.
It's interesting because, you're talking about the extreme of it, which actually leads me to the fourth.
Yes, the fourth
thing that I look for, which is, does it scale?
Yep.
So real fitness advice works for beginners and athletes. Sammy and I, we just did an episode on, she's a professional athlete.
Really? Say that again.
Yeah.
Say that again. So
real fitness advice works for beginners and athletes. So Sammy said something really interesting. In fact, it's one of the clips that's a promo on our Instagram where she says, and I'm paraphrasing, I think I'm getting close. It's the vegetables that are the difference that separate the non-athlete from the athlete. The meat and potatoes are the same for everybody. We all have a biomechanical trajectory. We have a plane of motion, and our bodies work in a very systematic and defined way. You move it beyond that definition and you break something, okay? And then we all have to contend with the law of conversion of mass. Energy in, energy out. And then the hormonal effect of those two things. Meat and potatoes. Now,
I just think that is so, continue. I just think it's so profound to say that, like.
Well, and then of course, so what are the vegetables? Well, the vegetables for a woman who's postpartum are very different vegetables for a basketball athlete.
And that automatically in my brain is going to be so helpful when I see this shit pop up on Instagram Reels or on TikTok, because I know like an athlete is not just doing 7 minutes of war Pilates like twice a week and looking like that. Like, that's just not going to happen.
No, that's part of number 4 is hype and trends. They tend to be all or nothing. It's all extreme, or it's based on the demonization of one aspect of nutrition or fitness and the overemphasis of another.
Oh, that is also amazing.
And it also, it takes away everything about the individual, but it takes none of that into an account. It works for everyone. No, it doesn't.
Well, that's so helpful to cut through that crap, to realize that, to be like, okay, here's what I am looking at right now, demonizing something in fitness and putting another element on a pedestal as the holy grail.
It's the same way that you can determine whether or not you're in a fad diet. It is the excessive restriction of calories, the demonization of a macronutrition component, and the overglorification of another. And what does this lead to? How does this work? So what makes it a fad? Well, it's quite simple, because you can sell products based off this.
Yeah. I mean, that just breaking it down like that makes it so easy to be able to look through the mirage. Like, yeah, it's really very helpful advice.
And ironically, all of that to sum it up on the fifth point that you should always consider, and I use this word probably more than I probably should, like I just used probably twice in one sentence, is it sustainable? If the advice requires starving yourself, skipping carbs forever, training 7 days a week, or only training for 7 minutes, that's hype. That's just hype. That is not health. That's it.
Yeah.
Those are the top 5. So I'll repeat those real quick. Number 1, look for fundamental principles of truth, not a gimmick. Okay. Number 2 is who the fuck is saying it and what are they selling? Number 3, is it based on any evidence or is this just anecdotal? And then the 4th would be, is it scale? And then finally, is it sustainable? And the bottom line is this: habit is the fundamental driver here, and it's built on that long-term individual need. It is all about you. The actual science is simple. It really is. They work on drama too, right? Listen to the music, listen to the way that these influencers are using the media platform. It's all based on extremes, and there's always a fucking supplement they're trying to sell.
Yeah.
They've moved beyond supplements, and I'm not saying that I will never do this. By no means am I saying I won't ever affiliate with something, but I'll be very transparent on it, right? You can believe that. But influencers, they are selling clothes, they're selling pills and powders, they're selling teas, and they're even selling like crypto. Like, it's crazy what these people are doing. You just got to be aware. There's going to always be some crazy trend that's going to pop up, some of them worse than others, but it's never going to end. So if you just arm yourself and again, take personal responsibility, you should be okay.
What I know, I find that so helpful to really start to assess and cut through things. Yeah, very interesting. Okay. Good shit there. When we're talking about sustainability and different diets, right, I just wanted to clarify, and this might, again, be a whole other topic that we don't want to dive in right now, but things like keto, right, or intermittent fasting, which, I quite enjoy, it doesn't mean there's not a place for them in fitness, right? Because, keto, in terms of like even helping people through cancer and starving sugar cells and all sorts of stuff, there's a lot of research that does back it as something that can be beneficial for health, if not forever, maybe just short term, right? Like, so say, I don't want to jump on and say things like that are all fads, because fasting, being in ketosis, they can all have different health benefits, right? It's just about whether or not it's long-term, like longevity and sustainability.
The short answer is yes, there's a place for those modalities. However, the extreme amount of available knowledge, there is a definitive lack of wisdom.
Right.
People just are really struggling to separate all the noise, which is precisely what this podcast is designed to help clear. Is there a place for fasting? Absolutely. As you know, I personally participate in fasting. I do not use it ever as a means of weight loss. That is not why I fast. I fast for cellular rejuvenation.
Yes.
I do it to remove glucose from my system, allow my body to take a break, and I feel better for it. I'll explain that to people in another episode, or they can go to the forgept.com blog and they can find the whole article that I wrote on this. I like to think of these fad diets are sold as a hammer, but you're a screw. You ever try to hammer in a screw? Doesn't work so well. It bends, gets warped, gets all fucked up. You're using the wrong tool. If you're conscientious about what you're trying to accomplish,
yes,
and there's a modality, like, say, for example, being in ketosis for a very limited period of time, in order to elicit some kind of outcome, and you're doing it responsibly and in a controlled fashion with a high level of self-awareness, yep, I have done every diet you can imagine, at least every mainstream, for a very simple reason. I'm curious, because I hear about them all the time. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to try this. And I usually put a time marker on it for myself. And what I do is I look at the science of, or at least the published rationalization, and then disputing articles about that particular approach, right? The food intake. And then I will apply my own very self-aware anecdotal response to that dietary intake. And I literally say, How do I feel? And I'm very aware, a very high level of conscientiousness between my body and my brain. I really believe the body follows the mind. So will I say that keto is bad? No, but I think it's like giving a monkey a gun. Giving a monkey a loaded gun is a really, really poor choice.
Yes, I
and
can
that's
agree
what
with
I
that.
feel like these fads are. You're giving a bunch of monkeys guns, and they're going to hurt themselves.
Eating this now one was bad enough.
To answer your question, definitively, yes, there is place for those kinds of things. But I would also caution that the ketogenic diet in its marketed form
Yes.
does meet the 3 criteria for a fad.
And I think that's an important distinction, because there is keto diet and then there's the marketed, hyped version of that, which is different. And having been on a keto diet myself, I understand the difference, because, I did a lot of research, understood that you have to replace your salts, for instance, and just things that is not necessarily known. I would come across other people doing keto and they would talk about how, they're feeling all these withdrawals and tiredness. And I'd be like, are you supplementing properly? Because on keto, you have to supplement certain things, otherwise you're going to suffer. But no, because they printed it from the internet or whatever, and they just heard about it, and so they just stopped eating all carbs. The end. I'm on keto.
But immediately it's disallowed in my realm, because the moment that you have to supplement to survive, you got a problem. The moment that you have to buy a machine that checks your ketone levels, no, you got a problem. So we're going down the wrong path at that level. So now here's what I said.
So you're not really big on supplementation then, like, at all? Because I'm always asking you about what supplements I should take to support, whatever. And I don't think you never really once recommended anything.
I think people get lost in the word supplementation, because it literally defines what it is. It's a supplement. It's not your meat and potatoes. It is without question a useful tool. It's like the difference between a chisel and a jackhammer. Supplements are just a little chisel. They're just a little tool that can do some of the fine detail. And there's only some supplements that I would even say that do that based on scientific evidence. Protein supplement may be helpful, especially with people in certain conditions or with certain nutritional preferences. And then creatine.
You did not just say creatine to me. I have an ongoing battle with my husband, who just says to me all the time, take creatine. And you can help me with this, have a fear of creatine because of its reputation for for water retention and making me feel bigger.
Yeah, you better sort that out, because there's very little evidence to support what you're saying.
So talking about myths, if I take creatine, am I going to hold enough water that I am feeling as though I've put on weight?
There can be a small period where some people have a retention response to creatine. So that means that you're inappropriately dosing, likely.
Right. So if you take the right amount, you shouldn't notice a physical change in that way.
I would not universally say that is true, because I have seen people who have done incremental dosing still have some kind of sense of retention, but also I don't know how much of that is actually placebo based because of all the research. And what people do, they're going to go to a rabbit hole, and the worst rabbit hole that you could possibly go down is Reddit. Actually, I would say that social media and the internet in general, and I think X, the formerly known as Twitter, I think that they're an excellent example of a bunch of unqualified people in a group with a bunch of other unqualified people saying a lot of more unqualified things, and all believing the unqualified things that they're saying. I have a much more vulgar way of describing that, but I'm trying to keep this a little bit more
for now.
So supplementation is fine. It's used as a tool. It should not be the backbone of anything.
But that said, you don't think the creatine, that's like a whole, if you do weights, you're going to get bulky. It wouldn't be significant enough that I should say not take creatine.
Unless you have a medical condition that would prohibit it, or a medical professional recommends that you don't take it, I don't see any reason why you couldn't make the decision to try it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting that you're saying that, because I have had so many discussions with Gustavo about it, because he is really, obviously sleep deprivation is a thing with a newborn baby, and Also, looking after my fitness, going to the gym when I can, or getting back into work and writing and producing and all of these things. And he is really saying it's going to support you. It's going to help you with your sleep deprivation, with all these things. And I'm just like, I'm so desperate, really. Well, not desperate, but I'm so determined to get back into my clothes again that I used to wear before having the baby, which, as you know, I have achieved for the majority part, but just not quite comfortably yet. The top button's a little too tight.
But you're getting there.
I do have a hangover, a rational fear of, I'm going to have water weight and it's going to make me feel bigger. And I didn't even realize that was hangover to that old mentality until this conversation.
We could do a whole nother episode on, maybe we could take the top, I don't know, 5 most popular supplements, and I can break them down for you, whether they're actually legitimate or not. That's something that we can put together. We could produce something like that. I can tell you right now that I've written quite an exhaustive article on creatine that we can find on the blog.
I know it's on the blog. It's so funny that I read your blog, but I haven't read that article, and I think this just speaks to, I think, so many people who talk about accountability. Sometimes you don't even know that you are holding on to a concept from fear. Because I could have read that article at any point, but I was like, oh no, creatine, nah. Why? Because I have a comfortability, obviously, in the belief that I, in some way, am helping myself by not taking it. Or how am I trying to language this? What am I trying to say? It's sometimes there is a comfortability in ignorance. And you have to really be able to sit in the discomfort of yourself and in a belief that you've held on to for whatever reason. Maybe it's not even conscious, and be able to be willing to open your mind up to the honest education surrounding that.
Like most people, you do come with bias. It can go from borderline resistance into dogma. So how do you contend with that? Because even to this day, you'll still send me things on social media and you're like, dude, is this legitimate?
You and my friend who's a dermatologist, I'm like, wait, will this really take 5 years off? He's like, no. Stop breaking my heart.
You're a curious person and you always look for efficiencies. I don't know if I would necessarily say you're somebody who's looking for shortcuts.
Not anymore.
Because that implies...
I think I was.
That's
not anymore.
Yeah. Laziness has not necessarily been a trait that you've ever exhibited to me.
No.
I think prioritization problems have been an issue. I know you use affirmations in the past, like in the mirror and you write things, but what do you do in your head or in your journals that help you say to not bring that bias in, because that just limits you? It's the flea in the jar.
It does. And I don't know how you give someone a curious mind. I know I have one. It's something that I have always had, but it's not something I've always nurtured. And you can see this in people like myself that maybe grow up in with a religious upbringing. It doesn't really nurture a curious mind. It's like, this is the way it is. And then once you make a break from that, everything opens up for me anyway. The biggest thing that helps me is treating my brain like a muscle that I want to work, because you get a lot of momentum going naturally on, say, negative things or just whatever. It's like a freight train, right? And you have to get the train going the other way. And at first that can be a bit laborious and slow, but it's just about commitment. Commitment is not sexy. Everybody wants motivation. Motivation is like the boy on the motorbike and the leather jacket. You're like, ooh, I feel motivated. Like, ooh. And commitment's like the guy maybe with the dad bod that's standing there, that's going to show up for you, every day, that's going to be there when shit hits the fan, going to be there when you put on 10 pounds, lose 10 pounds. Commitment, he might not be as sexy as motivation, but that's who you marry. That's who you stand by. So I just became really committed to getting the train in my mind to move the other way. And it doesn't always. I have days where that's hard, but you find your techniques. I do love affirmations. I love reframing things. So if I'm feeling stressed about my progress, I don't feel it it has been hard to be so lean and then get pregnant and have all that postnatal natural weight that I then choose to let go of. That has been challenging. And, in the first 2 months when I couldn't even get my jeans over my thighs, that old me would have spiraled into 800 calorie mode. But instead, I have the techniques now where I can go, I am taking steps every day towards my goal. And it just takes the edge off. Like, you just want to take the edge off it, like just a little bit, or this is part of my journey, or whatever it is. So everyone can phrase things in a different way, but it's just about going in the direction of relief. Just whatever the thought is that gives you a little breathing space from that spiral. And it gets easier and easier and easier. And because it's a muscle, the more you train it, the easier it becomes. So it's not as much work now when I have an intrusive thought come up to change as it was last year or 2 years ago.
Well, you essentially just described discipline. Motivation is a supplement. It's not the meat and potatoes. Motivation, it is a call to action, and it gives you that spark of inspiration to follow through. It's the discipline. That's where the real results come, and that's where the sustainability is. The moment that it became clear to me that you have moved towards discipline while you still leverage the emotion of motivation to get the train moving. When you said that sometimes you don't do very well, but you get back on it, that's not motivation. It's actually the discipline, because you've exceeded where motivation is useful. You've moved into where discipline is the only fuel you have. If you are objective about your goals and your expectations, and you start hitting milestones, which is why I was talking
exactly
about intrinsic motivation, right? It's, you get a little bit.
You do. I was totally so excited when my jeans, like my buttons could do, because one by like over the months of postpartum, I could do up one button this month and maybe another one. And then when I could get them all the way up, I was so excited. I messaged you. Like, I was like, wow, I am so close now. And it felt at the time so far away. And just that same mentality, one step at a time. It's all you need to take, because before you know it, you turn around and you're there.
Well, I hate to be the conductor on this train that you've just built, because you use the train analogy. It works so perfectly, which is every moment of motivation on the road of discipline is just a station.
Yeah.
That's all it is. You have to get to each station, but they never end.
Never.
For the rest of your life. The discipline train is forever. It's in perpetuity.
That's right.
And so if you are able to recognize that sometimes that train's going to hit a hill and it's not going to be going as fast as it does when it's going to go down the other side, but you find peace with that. And there's a contentment if you just keep chugging along. What was that? The little engine that could?
Yeah, the little engine that could.
You just got to keep going. It's going to be hard. Yeah. You're going to have moments where you feel a sense of despair. You're going to have moments where you'll use words like, I'm just not motivated to work out today, because what you basically did is you just expressed an emotion.
Yeah, totally.
For example, I call it the 5-minute rule. Anytime I have a client tell me, or I tell myself, when I just don't feel like working out today, my rule is that I will do 5 minutes. And you want to know what happens every single time?
Finish your workout.
I just like, I'm actually feeling pretty good, and I'm just going to keep going.
Getting started sometimes is the hardest part.
That's right. Just 5 minutes. But you make a great point, though. There's a misconception between the concepts of motivation and discipline. Yes. What is my common theme? We're too wrapped up in our feelings. I'm starting to recognize it maybe as a level of self-centeredness that is not necessarily narcissism. And of course, everybody's self-centered. It's this new way that people are expressing it. And we don't have a lot to complain about. We wake up in the morning, and the worst thing that could happen to most Americans, or UK and Australian, is that their coffee machine is broken, or that the line at Starbucks is too long. That'll fucking ruin people's day. You don't wake up anymore and think, will I eat this week? And we have all of the things that we humans have ever wanted since the beginning of time. The way that societies and civilizations were built, they're predicated on this outcome. That was the whole point. And now here we are, and we're ungrateful, little brats. Just a bunch of ungrateful little twats. And here's the thing. If people could just kind of let go of some of those manufactured feelings, I know how they could do it. Log off all of your social media for X period of time. Give yourself a goal, say 7 to 14 days. I've tested it with clients, and they report to me incredible feelings of joy. Think about it. Like when you scroll through social media, all you're seeing is people who have more than you. They have a better house, they have a better car, they have a better body, they have a better vacation. I would say that a fair amount of posts on social media are, hey, these people go on there and they go on these rants about something terrible that they've done or that has happened in their life, most of which they've manufactured the problem. And now they're complaining to social media because that's their echo chamber for affirmation, likes, and attention. So we're too wrapped up in our feelings. If we can just pull away and recognize that we're going to have good days, we're going to have bad days. And it's our choice how often and how frequently the good and the bad happen. We don't get to control accidents, acts of nature, terrible things that happen that are just the natural course of life. We don't get to choose those things. I'm not talking about that crap. Of course, that's what everyone's going to say. Well, you can't control. Yeah. You can control precisely how you choose to respond. So I've had this long-term internal dialogue, almost a battle with myself. And it started somewhere around 17 or 18. And I was at a crossroads in my life as a young man. And I had to make the decision as to what kind of man I wanted to be. And it would be very easy for me. And I'm sorry, Mom, but it's just the truth. I grew up weird and in an extremely hostile environment. I've been homeless and I know what starvation feels like. I didn't know this until I was much older. My mom knows even better than me because she had to go longer without food. We had a tough go. And you say, how is that possible in America? Well, it is. It's rare. And by per capita, it's extremely rare, but it does happen. I had the misfortune of going through that. I've changed my attitude. I've decided that I am not going to allow the circumstances of my life to control me. I'm going to control how I respond to and use the experience and the circumstances to become a better person and to be somebody who adds value.
Yep.
How am I going to leave a legacy? And I think that if people were to maybe be a little bit more introspective and objective about what they're assessing about themselves and get away from their feelings a little bit more and think about like, okay, it's going to be hard, but is it really that fucking hard to work out and eat right?
The only true freedom that we actually have is within ourselves, because no one can ever control that. It's very Taoist, very Buddhist. One of the founders of Nichiren Buddhism was imprisoned in Japan for a long time, and he wrote a lot of letters to his wife talking about how he found true freedom. His freedom was literally taken away from him, and yet within that, he was able to discover what it really meant to be free, because it was all in here, man. That's all we live with, and emotions are really important. Emotions are our guide of where we're at, and give us the opportunity to make choices around where we want to be at, but to get bogged down in them, overwhelmed in them, and just, as you're saying, like just go to these echo chambers to reinforce a position. I don't think that's using them to how we can best, how we can best let our emotions serve us.
That's a good way to capstone that idea around emotions and feelings, which is not allowing them to be consuming. And I think that's the problem, right? It's so easy to allow them to consume them because you can get them reinforced. We're not designed to be perpetually happy, unhappy. We're not designed to be perpetually aroused or angry. We're not designed that way. Human beings are very multifaceted. I'm not disallowing emotion. What I'm saying is that I think that people misuse it. It's being abused. It's been weaponized. Now, if somebody gets their feelings hurt, that's a big deal. Dude, man, I grew up in the 80s. Getting your feelings hurt was part of life. And I would never trade that. Oh, by the way, I have an eye condition that is unfortunately unique, which makes it so that my glasses are cartoonishly thick.
Of course they are.
And coming out of the 1970s and into the 80s, young men's glasses frame fashion wasn't high priority.
No, it definitely wasn't, no. And coupled with your love of Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, I'm sure that didn't do you any favors.
I did not do me any favors. No, because those things back then were considered highly nerd. Now they're normal, they're mainstream, right? But back then, I was the kid who was into all of those 80s cartoons. The big ones were like, man, I was into like the GoBots and Voltron. And then there was, of course, He-Man and G.I. Joe. Those are like,
don't forget She-Ra. Hello.
Well, and I like She-Ra, and I like this, like even some of the middle ones, like the Smurfs and the Snorkels, and
Anyway,
the list goes on. And yeah, but the point that I'm making is that I've made the decision, right? I choose how I'm going to utilize those emotions.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to give you a Star Wars reference. I could either become a Sith or I can become a Jedi. How am I going to use my anger? And I'm not a
I knew it was
pacifist
going to
by
happen at
any
some
means.
point. Like, I got to,
Star Wars,
to be honest with you, I'm surprised we've gone this long. So well done to you.
I told myself no Star Wars references. I said you will get one Lord of the Rings reference, and then I
Well,
haven't
you know
done
what?
that
You
yet.
traded your LOTR reference for it. Yeah, got it. It's a T.
And I'm sure it's quite controversial because a lot of people would probably disagree with me, and that's fine. Don't be such a baby about it, though. Why you have such strong feelings about that?
Go cry on
but
Reddit.
it is true that, yeah, go cry on Reddit. Well, actually, I think TikTok's more that medium. But the thing is, it's the constructive use of the emotion.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about disallowing emotions or being suppressive of one's emotion. The energy is there. This is a law of conversion of mass. Energy can't be created or destroyed,
right.
but you can sure decide how you're going to use that emotional energy.
The dialogue that we're having here, the concepts that we have touched on are really just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much to unpack here, and as we're discovering, it links into all areas. Your fitness and nutrition is just one pillar of what we as human beings kind of sit on and need to nurture. And I'm looking forward to all of the conversations that we can have around this.
I want to be clear about something. The intention of these conversations is not to be adversarial, or goal isn't to just piss people off. We talked about that fear, and I feel pretty confident that what we're doing is the right thing to do, even if it makes people uncomfortable, because we're not going to bully, but you damn well better believe that I'm going to say what is true. And you may not like the way that I say it, but the intention isn't to necessarily cause anybody to be overly butthurt about it. I can't control that, though.
I think there's a creed for that anyway, Michael, so I'll be right.
Yeah, I can, however, be authentic. And if what I say resonates with people and is very helpful, then mission accomplished. If it pisses you off and you don't like what I have to say, I would encourage you to reconsider how you're feeling about that and see if there's any merit into what I said, and maybe do some self-examination and see if you can choose how you're going to interpret what I'm saying, because the intention is to help you. You may not like the way I say it, and I can appreciate that. Not everybody's going to like me. That's okay. But if a majority of people don't like the truth, which they don't, I'm prepared to accept the consequences of that.
And on that, definitely, I would love to know what people think in terms of, has anything resonated? What would you like to hear more about? So definitely comment, let us know. We'll read everything.
The ideas for content are sometimes best given to you by the people who are consuming the content. I mean, I can come up with all kinds, but I want to give people.
Yeah, let's get specific. Let's get with what you're struggling with.
Precisely. Yeah. So all that to say, this has been a lot of fun. I can't wait for our next recording. Obviously, we're going to split this into two. And so this is the end of the first episode. So.
All right.
We did it.
Yay. Until next time.
I know. All right, my dear. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I'll let you go. You have a wonderful day, and I will see you very shortly.
Bye.
Cheers.